Well, let's go ahead and turn in our Bibles, if you would. We're going to take a one real short verse. Maybe I'll call it a springboard verse tonight, because we're still talking about the heart. We're doing a series called Fearfully and Wonderfully Made. And there is one phrase in the Bible: hope deferred makes the heart sick. Proverbs 13:12, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Now, that really is a topic all unto itself, but I just want you to capture that one idea that the heart can become sick. And he's not just talking about the physical heart there, of course, in Proverbs, but hope deferred makes the heart sick. I'm sure he's talking about that spiritual heart that's on the inside of all of us. We're doing a series called Fearfully and Wonderfully Made. David declared in Psalm 139 his praise to God, and he said, "For I am fearfully and wonderfully made." And as we look at the creation of God, we see His glory. But when we look at the human body as the very pinnacle of God's creation, man, you, who you are, not just your physical body, but you as a person, but certainly your physical body, we see again the image of God, the glory of God, and the majesty of God, the wisdom of God in how He created each one of us. And we've been looking at the heart last week. We looked at that proverb that says, "Guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life." And we talk about how you can have a new heart. That muscle, that organ, that pump that's in the middle of your chest is an incredible creation of God. I mean, just think of it for a moment. It weighs about 10.5 ounces, and yet it'll last, we certainly hope it'll last at least this long, 75 years plus. Never requires any shutdown time, never requires any lubrication, and it pumps your blood 2,000 gallons a day, and it pumps it through this system of 60,000 miles of vessels. I mean, that's incredible in and of itself. But in your lifetime, over a 75-year span, it is going to cycle, or beat is what we commonly call it, over 2,500,000,000 times. It's incredible. The valves of your heart are operating 4,000 to 5,000 times every hour. I read some of those statistics and I thought to myself, no wonder I feel tired. All of that going on inside of me every single hour. And it's just incredible how God designed this amazing pump, this organ. But one of the things, I want you to remember this also for later on in the message, one of the things that really fascinated me about the heart is that it is what medically they call self-stimulating. In other words, most of the rest of your body and all of your organs, they get electrical impulses, messages from the brain. But the heart gives itself its own electrical impulses. There are two areas of your heart, they're called nodes, two areas of the heart, one commonly called the pacemaker. Because this tissue is so unique, it serves as both muscle and nerve tissue, and it creates its own electrical impulse. That's why it really is true at times. You could remove a human heart from the body, and for a very short period of time, you can see it's still pumping. Because it's self-stimulating. This is one of the most amazing features of the human body, and certainly in all of God's creation. It was several years ago now, and yet it sticks in my mind as if it were yesterday, and it's one of those experiences that none of us ever want to have. But my mom and dad were driving here from Illinois. They were coming for the winter, going to stay 3 months or so, and they were over in Arizona. It was later on in an afternoon, but they were going to push a little farther so they could get on in to our house the next day. And Dad stopped in a small town in Arizona to put gas in the station wagon, and when he was at the back of the station wagon car pumping gas, he suddenly became ill, and he felt sharp pains in his chest, and he became all clammy and sweaty and gasping for breath, and he took a couple steps away from the car and was very nauseous, beginning to feel this sickness and these strange pains in his body, and he thought to himself, could this be a heart attack? Certainly had the symptoms of a heart attack, the chest pain, the funny feeling on the left, and shortness of breath, and I don't know where the nausea came from, but anyway, that's what he experienced, and then it kind of subsided. He put the nozzle back in the gas pump and got back in the car, and he simply said to my mom, and she looked at him, he said, "I don't feel good." And she said, "You don't look good." And she said, "Your color is funny." It was an ashen color, and you could tell he'd still just been recently perspiring, and he just didn't look good. And he said, "Yeah, I feel a little ill." And he said, "Back down the street a ways, there's a hotel. Why don't we just call it a day, and we'll get a good drive tomorrow." But here's what he was thinking. When he drove by it, he just happened to remember there was a hospital on the other side of the street. And Dad realized that something strange had happened within him, and he's hoping for the best, but could that have been a heart attack? Something strange just went on in me. And so Mom just thinks it's the flu or something he ate. And they went back and checked into that hotel. They called us, said, "Hey, we're not going to make it when we thought we would. Dad's probably got a little touch of the flu, and we're going to spend the night here in a hotel and see how he feels in the morning." Well, later that night, it came again, only more severe, and he told my mom, "Call 911, get me over to that hospital, I'm having a heart attack." The ambulance just came from across the street and rushed him across to the hospital, and there he was in the midst of another heart attack, and so they immediately recognized some symptoms and said, this is not for us here at this facility. They put him on a helicopter and airlifted him to another facility that was known to specialize in cardiac care and having some of the best cardiologists in the whole region. The only problem was my mother doesn't drive, and all this happened so quickly that she didn't even know where they had taken him. And so we get the phone call in the middle of the night and saying, "Mark, something's happened. I mean, I think your dad had a heart attack." "Well, where is he?" "Well, I don't know. They put him on a helicopter." "Where'd they take him?" "I don't know. And not only that, I can't drive. I can't go anywhere. I don't know what to do." And I said, "Mom, well, first of all, just calm down, and where are you?" I don't remember." "Well, just call me back in 10 minutes, find out where you are. I'll get in the car as soon as I hear. I'll start driving over." I mean, it's everything just thrown into chaos. Dad's had a heart attack. We don't know where they've taken him. Mom is in a panic. She can't drive. And so a few minutes later, she called back, and she had asked somebody what town they were in, and then she said, "Hey, Mark, something just popped into my mind." She said, "Remember a couple years ago I made that friend at your church, Yvonne, and they moved somewhere to Arizona? Give me their phone number." I said, "Mom, Arizona is a big place. I mean, I might be closer to you than they are." "Well, just give me their number." I'll cut through the chase here for a moment. My mom called that number, and Yvonne, who had moved away a few years before, was living in the exact same town where Dad had the heart attack. I got a call back from Yvonne saying, I'm within less than 10 minutes from your mother. My husband and I are going there right now. We're on our way to get your mom. We'll find out where your dad is. We'll take your mom to where your dad is, and we'll let you know what the details are, but we will be with your mom in less than 10 minutes. Now, that in and of itself, isn't that incredible? I mean, that here, stopping for gas, and you have a heart attack in a town where someone you met a couple years ago had moved to previously. Well, we found out where they had taken him, and I got in the car, and of course you drive over, and you're going through a multitude of emotions. And here's what had happened: that helicopter landed, and they took him into that hospital, and one of the top cardiologists in the region was on duty, and they took him into an exam room. They laid him out on a table, and as that cardiologist was examining him, as they were taking a picture of his heart, he had his third heart attack within those last few hours, and it was a doozy. And the doctor immediately, without any prep, without doing anything, I forget the terms, but he took the long, I'll just call it a wire, and rammed it up my dad's artery, up his groin area, and up and opened up the blockage and literally saved his life. The doctor said, had that happened even 5 minutes before, or had you been anywhere else when that happened, you'd be dead right now. But because it happened while he was on the table with an expert who could ram that thing up in there and open up that blockage in a matter of seconds, my dad survived. I believe that was God's hand, God's timing. What a long, long night that was when I finally got there. The whole day had gone by, and then I got there, and that next night as we just sat up with Dad, is he going to make it through the night? Things were looking better, but is he going to make it through the night? What happens if it happens again? He had 3 in just a short time. Well, my dad came through really well. They did a few other procedures on him, opened up a couple other areas. But here's the fascinating thing. About, I don't know, I lose the time frame, but I'd say within a week later, I'm still over there with him in the hospital. And I'm standing out in a hallway, and a young man comes up to me and he says, "Hey, are you Mark? Are you Ed's son?" And I said, "Yeah." And now you can tell by his dress, he worked at the hospital. He goes, "Well, I was one of the technicians that was on duty the night your dad was brought in here." And he said, "I sure like your dad." My dad and he had been talking and everything. And then he got this idea, this technician. You could tell he was kind of a computer. I mean, he loved technology. You'd see the excitement in him, anything technical. And he says to me, "Hey, you want to come down to my station and see your dad's heart attack?" I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "We have it all on a digital. You can watch it." And as they were examining him, they were filming what was going on with his heart through some kind of digital technology, which I'll never understand. And he said, "You want to see your dad's heart attack?" Yeah, I mean, how can you turn that down even though it's not something you really relish? But yeah, and we went to the screen and we saw this heart beating. He said, "Now there's your dad's heart." And then the heart started not only to flutter, but you could tell the heart was struggling. And he said, "Now there is your dad dying. And there's the problem." And he pointed out an artery that was completely shut down, and you could see the blood flow was just backing up there. And he said, "There's the problem." And then we saw this wire snaking up quickly like a black snake coming up a narrow river, and it went right to that blockage and pushed its way through and opened things up, and the blood went flowing into that area again, and then the heart settled down to a normal beat. And the technician who had just said, "There's your dad dying," said, "There's your dad living." And I stood there amazed. I mean, that's not just anybody's heart. That's my dad's heart. I just watched a digital picture, video, whatever you call it, of my dad entering that time of death. Any other time, any other place, and that would have been the last my dad's heart would have beaten. I saw him dying, and I saw him living. And even though it still tears me emotionally to think of that night and all the things that happened when he had his heart attack, I marvel at what I saw on that screen. The blood flow being cut off, the heart gasping for life, and then blood flow restored and the heart restoring to normal. Fascinating. And truly, when we talk about guarding your heart like we did last week, with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. I mean, one of the things we talked about last week was God can give you a new heart spiritually. But once He gives you a new heart spiritually, it's our responsibility to keep our heart healthy. It is our responsibility to do what we can for our physical heart, but it is also our responsibility to do all that we can, especially for our spiritual heart. Let me give you just a few statistics from the Center of Disease, and also this is from the Heart Foundation. Also, I mixed some things together. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death for both men and women in the United States. It will claim approximately 1 million people this year will die of heart disease. Every 33 seconds, someone in the United States dies of a cardiovascular disease, which is roughly the equivalent of a September 11th-like tragedy repeating itself every 24 hours, 365 days a year. More people die of heart disease than that die of AIDS and every single form of cancer and every single accident that happens every year. If you took all the people that died of cancer, all the people that died of AIDS in the last 12 months, and all the people that died in accidents, car accidents, construction accidents, if you totaled them all up, they still wouldn't come close to the people that die of heart disease. More die of heart disease. Over 40% of all deaths in the United States are heart disease. By 2020, heart disease will be the leading cause of death throughout the whole world. This year, almost another million will have their first heart attack. Many of them will have occurring heart attack without any prior symptoms or any warning signs. 250,000 Americans die annually of a particular heart disease called sudden cardiac death. 680 die every year. Half the victims of this sudden cardiac death are under the age of 65. An estimated 80 million Americans have one or more types of heart disease. That's 1/4 of our population about. About 8.9 million Americans have chest pain caused by reduced blood flow. Currently, about 7.9 million Americans are alive who have had a heart attack. In 2008, the total cost of cardiovascular disease and diseases of the heart was estimated at $448.5 billion. Every 40 seconds, someone in America will have a stroke, and every 4 minutes, one of those will die. Not to speak of the terrible disabilities and devastation. I mean, one of the most important health issues we can ever look at is heart health. Keeping your heart healthy. But I want to take it into another dimension also. One of the most important things you can do as a Christian is focus on your heart health. How healthy is your heart? Guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. Hearts can become sick. And even Jesus said in Luke 21, he said, in the last days men's hearts are going to be failing them because of fear. That's going to be one of the signs of the end times. Now, here's what I'd like to do tonight. I pored over different books that people gave me and classes and different things on the heart. And I have come up with 4, and I don't have all statistics on all this, and we'll have to keep it very general and basic. But it seems to me there are 4 basic heart diseases. Oversimplification, I know there's hundreds, but at least 4 kind of areas of heart disease. I want to look at those tonight because there are also areas of our spiritual life that we need to guard our heart. That we need to make sure our spiritual heart is healthy. The first area, and just write down the simple word, is blockage. Blockage. The medical term is myocardial infarction. That's not an easy phrase to say, myocardial infarction. And what does that mean? That means that the heart did not receive a proper blood flow because of some kind of blockage. That's what a heart attack is. What we commonly call heart attack is when your heart doesn't get the oxygen, the blood that it needs because of some kind of blockage. And so, even though we're talking about heart disease, when we use that term heart attack, we mean a blockage, like what my dad had. We could see it on the digital, on the screen. We could see the blockage. We could see the opening up of that blockage. And later on, they showed us other procedures where we could see the stents being put in to keep it open after it was cleaned out, and et cetera, et cetera. But it has to do with blocking. Now, here's what I want to tell you tonight. Spiritually, you and I need to be careful that our heart is healthy spiritually, that there's nothing blocking the flow of life into our own hearts. And the Bible's clear that one of the greatest issues of life is that when we get a blockage into our own heart, we have a heart attack on ourselves because there's been some kind of blockage. Anything that blocks life flowing into your heart needs to be dealt with, and dealt with as quickly and as swiftly as we possibly can. Let's look at this for a moment. Psalm 66:10. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord does not hear me. Now I would certainly call that a blockage. If I cannot pray, if the Lord does not hear me when I pray, there is a blockage. He says, if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord does not hear me. There's a blockage. Now that Hebrew word that we translated regard, you see it on the screen, ra'ah, and it simply means, it has a variation of meanings, but they're all kind of tied together with a common thread. It means to approve of something, but it also means to behold something, to gaze at something with enjoyment, to see something, to have respect for something. Linguist Archer and Harrison, in their book Theological Words of the Old Testament, point out that when this Hebrew verb is used to see, it always carries with it the connotation of not just to see, but to provide for. If I truly see the poor, I will give to them. I will provide for them. To truly see is to provide in the usage of this word. And so when David here says, if I see iniquity in my heart, I know it's there. I approve of it. I do nothing to remove it. I even provide for it. Then there's a blockage. if I regard, if I see, if I approve, if I have respect to, if I gaze upon with enjoyment. In other words, this is not a sin that we struggle with and we say, oh, God, help me. This is a sin that we've accepted and we even feed it and we like it and we enjoy it. If I regard iniquity in my heart, if I know it's there and feed into it anyway, there's a blockage. You're going to have some chest pains. You're going to have some symptoms, and you better wake up and get some help and get that thing opened up so it doesn't kill you. Now, I want to give you it's just kind of a made-up term, but I stole this from somebody else years ago. He's a gifted counselor, a nationally known counselor, and he made this statement. He doesn't believe that if you're a Christian, any problem that you have, if you go to counseling and you're a Christian, this particular counselor, Jay Adams, maybe you read some of his books, says that anything that you have that is causing a blockage of joy in your life, you can find the diagnosis for it in the Sermon on the Mount. Now you think about the Sermon on the Mount for a moment, and it says, blessed are, blessed are, blessed are. That word blessed is the Greek word makarios. So I simply call this the makarios principle of counseling, and it's simply this. If someone who is a believer, is not experiencing a flow of joy in their life, then they need to look at Matthew 5, 6, and 7, look at the Sermon on the Mount, because there's some blockage in their life. Now, it makes perfect sense to me. If Jesus said, you're going to have an outflow of joy if you're this, you're going to have an outflow of joy if you're that, you're going to have an outflow of joy if you're clean in heart, you're going to have an outflow of joy if you're hungry and thirsting for righteousness, etc., etc. You read the whole Sermon on the Mount, and the whole thing is based on those first 11 verses. We call them the Beatitudes, the Blesseds, the Makarios, and then the rest of the sermon is illustrating them. If you have something in your heart that is blocking that flow of joy, you got a heart problem. I really believe when we counsel with people, it makes it very simple to just use the Bible. If someone is a Christian and they're not living in a state of blessedness, they're not experiencing the joy of the Lord and the peace of the Lord in their life, then we need to ask a simple question. What is blocking your heart? Maybe there's some relationship in there. Remember, it says if you got aught against your brother, go get right with him even before you give your gift. It talks about if you hate your brother in your heart. You've heard it said that don't murder. But it says, I say even if you're mad in your heart, if you got anger without cause in your heart toward a brother and you're saying araka, you murdered in your heart. You've heard it said, don't commit adultery. But if you're gazing on a woman with lust, you've already committed adultery in your heart. What does the Sermon on the Mount have to do with? It has to do with your heart. And if our heart is right, and if our heart is being dealt with by God, then there should be an outflow of joy. Why? Because the life of the kingdom is in our heart. I want you to ask yourself right now a very hard, honest question. Are you living blessed? Is there a daily flow of peace and joy from your heart, grace and peace and joy? That's what Jesus promised you, unless there's a blockage. If there's something blocking the life of the kingdom coming into your heart, then we need to do something radical to get it open again. There needs to be some repenting. There needs to be some reconciling. Something that God will lead us to do, that we can find the issue in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. A lot of people will say, oh, Pastor, you're just oversimplifying everything. Well, life doesn't have to be as complicated as we make it. Live for Jesus. Keep your heart right with God. There's going to be a flow of joy in your life. Keep a healthy heart. I really believe that after all these years I've been in the ministry, I have seen it's true time and time again. The answer to what we're struggling with can be found in those passages. Blessed are those who. Blessed are those who. Because if you're being blessed, you're working your way through any issue that comes along your way. You've got the grace and the joy and the peace to get through. Blessed are those. But you see, there can't be a blockage. What's the answer? The answer is a cleansed heart. Matthew 5:8, part of that Sermon on the Mount, it says, blessed are the pure in heart, they will see God. I know I said this some time ago in another message, but I struggled with that passage for years. Because pure means without any other element, nothing else mixed in. And I have yet to meet anyone whose heart has absolutely nothing else mixed in. My heart is not that way, and I'll be honest with you, I doubt if your heart is that way. There's always things in our heart that need to be dealt with. Can anybody here say, there's absolutely nothing at all in my heart except a pure, unadulterated love for God? I never have any self-motives. I mean, come on, we all wrestle with self-motives. And so I looked at that verse for years and I said, I can never see God. How can my heart ever be truly pure? I heard another man, a linguist, teaching on this, and he pointed out the word for pure there is not the word commonly used for pure. It's the word kathros, which means cleansed. Jesus did not say, blessed are those who never have anything else in their heart. He simply said, blessed are those who have their heart cleansed. You and I will never get to the place where our heart is completely pure, but all of us can get to the place where our heart is completely cleansed, where the blood of Jesus is continually cleansing us. Remember David, when he sinned, what did he cry out to God for? He said, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. Cleanse me from my sin. Purify me with hyssop. I shall be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a right spirit in me. Isn't that what he was praying about? His heart. He knew the issue of his sin came down to his heart. And to have what the Scripture calls a pure heart really means having a cleansed heart. Allowing the Spirit of God to continually keep the arteries of your spiritual heart open so that the life of the kingdom can flow into you and then out of you. We read this several times in the Scripture. 2 Timothy 2:22, follow after those who call upon the Lord from a pure heart. 1 Peter 1:22, since you have in obedience to the truth purified your souls in sincere love, fervently love one another from the heart. Let it flow out of you. 1 Timothy 1:5, he says, the end of the commandment is to love from a pure heart and to have a good conscience and sincere faith. God is good to those who have a pure heart. Psalm 73:1-13. 1 Corinthians 6:11 lists a whole list of sinfulness that will not inherit the kingdom of God. And he says, but such were some of you. But now you are washed. Now you're clean. Now those blockages have been removed. Now you've got life in your heart. Life flowing in by the kingdom flowing out. Ezekiel 36, last week we talked about the new heart. But right before that passage of the new heart, the verse right before it says, I will clean you. I will sprinkle clean water. I will cleanse you. It's about being cleansed. I stumbled over this passage for a while too. Maybe you have. 1 John 3:19-22 is both a promise and kind of an enigma because it says, if my heart doesn't condemn me, then I can ask what I will and God will do it. But then it says something very odd. It says, and if our hearts condemn us, God is greater than our hearts. What does that mean? If you look into your own heart and you perceive that there is a blockage, understand this, God can purify your heart. God can open up your heart. God can do miracles in your heart. God can give you a healthy heart again so that you can pray. And that leads me back to the verse we started this whole discussion on about blockage. Psalm 66:10 says, if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. But the very next verse says, but He has heard me. Aren't you glad for that? David didn't live a condemned life. He knew there was things that needed to be dealt with, but he knew that God had dealt with him. But He has heard me. I trust you and I can say that today. I trust that you and I can put the monitor to our own heart and see a healthy heart with nothing blocking. If not, don't leave here tonight until you get that removed. If there's anything blocking the flow of life into your heart, that's why you're not having joy coming out of your heart. Deal with it tonight. God will help you. He's here. Here's another, number two area. I'm going to give you four. Number one is blockage. Number two is infection. This was a lot more on this than I thought, but something called endocarditis. It's an infection of the cardiac muscle wall. Myocarditis, it's an inflammation of the cardiac muscle. Pericarditis, that's where there's an inflammation of the sac around the heart that makes problems to the heart. How about rheumatic heart disease, rheumatic fever? What caused rheumatic fever? That sickness that comes, but it affects the heart. It can enlarge the heart so it won't pump properly, or it can mess up the valves of the heart. But it has to do with some kind of infection, some foreign thing that shouldn't be there. The infections that can hurt the heart. Now I'm not trying to scare you because this is not common. But it's possible to get a simple infection from some other procedure and it gets to your heart and you die. And you say, but that was just a little simple procedure. No, any infection in your body is serious. Because if it can get in your bloodstream, if it can get in your heart, if that infection gets to your heart, it can cause damage to your heart. Guard your heart with all diligence. Don't let anything cause the muscle of your heart to become infected. Don't let anything to cause the surrounding area of your heart to get infected and press in upon the heart. And maybe now you're thinking, well, what spiritual application can we make of this? To me, the infection of the heart is bitterness. When someone hurts you, when someone wounds you, when something happens in your life, if you don't clean up that wound, if there's not a healing that occurs quickly, what can happen? An infection. One of the worst things that can happen to you is you allow that infection to get to your heart. For out of the heart flows the issues of life. If you get an infection in your heart, it can not only ruin your life, it can cost you your life. Remember David's wife, Michal, remember her? A daughter of Saul, and there they were together, and she had been given to David for his exploits, and they were married, and then in 2 Samuel 6:16,